again, communication is kind of key. So having vocabulary, being able to express yourself, being able to have the idea is one thing. That's language theory. There's concepts in your head that you want to get out. And so, here we go. Just to experiment with that. Does everyone know what that is? What is that?
Okay.
An animal? Okay, all right. So in language theory, really that's not anything. It's ink on a board. That's what that is. Symbols. But the way your brain works in language theory is you have the actual thing in real life, right? A kitten. People have seen cats in real life, right? There's not one in the room, but you guys said that's a cat. No, that's a symbol for what a cat is. A real cat is out there in the grass hunting mice, right? In your head, from the time you were a child, you remembered, oh, that's what a cat is, and your brain formulated a concept in your head of furry things with 4 legs are cats. And when you were young, you were working it out. When you saw a dog, sometimes you'd be like, cat. Your mom would be like, no, dog. Huh? What? And then you kind of figured out the differences, right? So then there was the concept in your head. All right? Then, when you got a little older, you learned signs and symbols represent things. And you learned how to read. And you learned language. And you learned that when you put these letters together, it symbolizes a cat. That's language theory. But that's the key to understanding this is your brain is processing concepts that represent what's in the real world or reality. And how your brain processes it might be a little different from the way somebody else processes it. When I say cat, they might see lions. They might see a sphinx, right? Their connection to their concept might be a little different from the symbol, right? They might see something different. And when we see things differently, it's because we all have had different life experiences. So the way that we formulate our concepts might be a little different and individualized for each person. So does everybody understand that concept? That yes, you're right. That's the concept of a cat, but what it really is ink on a board. And if I showed that to somebody who speaks French, they'd be like, I don't know what that is. Right? Because your tools are different. Your symbols are different. Your processes are different. Everything we go through shapes who we are and how we think. We all live in a filtered reality. What you think when I draw the word woman on the board, what concept comes into your head? When I draw the concept, the symbol for man, what comes into your head? African American, Latino, what pops in your head? White, what pops into your head? And remember, there's 3 things you're dealing with. What's in the real world? And there is no reality. We're never all going to see the same thing. So we don't even know, if we were all had visual impairment and we were all just a shade off in color blindness, what you call gold to me might look different, but we all call it gold, right? So with art, that plays a big part. Everything's filtered. We're seeing things through a filtered lens of our experience, our bias, our prejudice. Does that make sense to everyone? And from that, you develop a value system also. Again, we've been shown so many images in our life making connections to what people are telling us a concept is, that sometimes it will formulate our reality. So if every night you go on the news, and on the news all they show are Latinos being arrested, what happens to your brain? We're just talking about concepts and symbols. I'm not talking about reality, right? We all know there's a lot of successful Latinos, right? But if someone only shows you one side, what happens to your brain? What happens to your value system? Art challenges your value system, your interpretation, your understanding, your vocabulary, and your concepts. And we can all be better people if we travel the world and get as much information and exposure to different experiences so that we can have a well-rounded opinion, bias, and value system. There's no right or wrong. It's just that with the more words you have, vocabulary, life experience, you just have a little more balanced perspective, right? So that's where we're working. That's where we're working with this class. We aren't going to just describe what we see. We're going to put it in the context of what did people at that time think and see? What was the concept in their head? Why did they call this beautiful? Why do they call this ugly? Why do they call this pornographic? Why do they call it just embarrassing? You have to ask those questions. And art sometimes forces you to ask those questions. Why you think that something is what it is, or why you think something's wrong or right. So the first thing that we see in the book is they show us, and this is the book in case you guys want to know what it looks like. The first question we're going to ask is differentiate between passive and active seeing. So active seeing is kind of what we're talking about, where instead of just looking at something and taking it at face value when it comes to art, you're going to use your critical thinking skills and analyze it in the context of what other people thought and what the artist was trying to symbolize. Are we all on the same page? Am I going too fast? Is anyone confused? Art is going to be the symbol. And artists are usually always trying to express something. They're always trying to tell you something. They're always trying to convey messaging. Some people might say that they're not, but then are they an artist? Define the creative process and describe the roles that artists most often assume when they engage in that process. These are the learning objectives. This is what we're going to go through for each question. And then the last question, discuss the different ways in which people value or do not value works of art. So again, if you lived a life where everyone told you that this is beauty, you watch the news every night, you watch commercials, you have magazines, and they tell you you got to have this lip gloss to be hot. You got to have braids to be cool. Right? If you're getting that every day, or you got to look this way to be rich and successful, what does that do to your mind? You formulate opinions from that, right? And the more people you meet, the more experiences you have, the more examples you see, the more information you'll have to make kind of like a critical thinking, real analytical opinion or assessment. Okay? So you don't, in life, and this is just a side note, you definitely want to challenge yourself to go as many places, meet as many people, and get out of your world, your bubble, as often as possible. So you can start using critical thinking skills and think, oh, I have an opinion about this because I've been to that place. I've met a Muslim. I've met a Christian. I've met a Buddhist. Not, oh, my friend told me about. I heard. Right? With that being said, I'm going to kind of basically give you guys the the foreshadowing or just kind of make sure you guys start preparing for the museum paper. The museums that I'm going to allow are the Oakland Museum, Golden Gate Park, SF MoMA, Yerba Buena. Those are the ones that I'm going to allow for now. I want you guys to get out of your comfort zone. Get on BART. Who's never been on BART before? Oh. Who's never been out of this area before? Who's never been out of California? Who's never been out of the United States? Okay. I just want you guys to get out, travel, see another region, and those museums are very reputable. And when you go for your museum paper, again, this is just to prepare you guys. You're not going to go, oh, there was a sculpture of a lady, and there was a tool in her hand. It's not descriptive. We just want you, I want it to be analytical. I want you to use your critical thinking skills. I want you to do your research about the artist and the art and find out what the artist was trying to say, what the art conveyed, and at the time when it was made, what type of impact did it have on society? Yes. I'll post this, but for you guys in class, I want your brains to start preparing for that paper. What you're going to do is say, this piece of art is contextually defined as, abstract, realism, whatever, impressionism. You're going to find out what the different categories are, contextual categories are for art, and you're going to have to explain to me why it fits that. Okay? You got to use your critical thinking skills. Everybody understand what critical thinking skills are? That's where you actually analyze for yourself and come to the conclusion based on the information you have. It's not just descriptive or passive. You're not just going to walk in there and go, it's a white sculpture about 4 feet tall. The end. That's not what I'm looking for. Everybody, we're on the same page on those expectations? Awesome. All right, let's go to the next slide. So Kwei Chang is one of the artists that is featured in the book. He basically uses gunpowder as his medium, and it creates his art. And his art isn't just random. He doesn't just blow things up and go, voila, look at my masterpiece. That's not what it's about. It's about what we were talking about before. He usually has some intention with symbolisms and a message he's trying to convey. So basically, one of the things he did was he did an explosion that formed an ephemeral red line. That's our first vocabulary word, ephemeral. So out of these options, which one do you think is ephemeral? Which one of these definitions do you think ephemeral means? Lasting for a very short time, 3-paneled, Turkish word for harem, visual illusion in art, spiritual rather than physical, inspire or permeate with feeling, deceit used in order to achieve one's goal. Yes, ephemeral. Sometimes art can just last for a moment. It doesn't have permanence. So his explosion happened, and if you were there, you got to see the art in that moment. It was ephemeral. Everyone got their first vocabulary word? The more words you have, the more information, the more tools you have to describe concepts, the more powerful you will be. If you walked into a store and you talk to the grocer there and you tell that person, I want some of this stuff and I want that and that thingy and the round stuff that's round and about this big and those things. How much are you going to get done during the day? Not much. The more words you have, the more vocabulary tools that express concepts, no one can stop you. Even if you get a job and you don't know what's going on, but you have great communication skills, you'll be heads and shoulders above everybody else. Because even if a guy or a woman knows something, and they can't explain it or communicate to other people how to get it done, then what good is information, right? Everyone got their first vocabulary word? Awesome. So with his explosion, gunpowder was an essential Chinese medium. So culturally, already speaking, he's already telling you something. Culturally, if you know about Chinese history, they were the first to really master explosives. Fireworks, all of that, that's culturally, appropriate. So right there alone in his art, he's giving you cultural reference just by using gunpowder. All right? The artist wished to bring people together through the beauty of pyrotechnic display. So that's what it looked like. He extended the Great Wall in China, but with an explosion. So the wall continues as fire. Ephemeral. It's there. Oh, that's beautiful. Where'd it go? But I was there. I felt it. It was real for that moment. It was art. This is in the book. So that's what it looked like. When he basically did his explosions for the 2008 Olympics, a lot of people were upset because when we watched it, we watched a tape, a live to tape. They basically recorded the rehearsal and then they aired that. People didn't see the live performance, so people felt like that was deceitful. Which leads us to our next word. So basically, Chai was chosen to direct the visual and special effects for both opening and closing ceremonies. Trail of 29 footprints of history made in fireworks was fired across the sky between Tiananmen Square and the Olympic Stadium, the Bird Nest. There you go. More pictures of how beautiful it was. Fireworks. That's the fireworks project for the opening ceremony of 2008 Beijing Olympic Games. In your, I forgot what I called it on Canvas, but it's optional. I put, supplemental material. I put some links to his site and some of his work so you can see it. Herzog, the Bird's Nest, Beijing National Stadium. Look at that architecture. Even the stadium for the Olympics was artistic. Kai was chosen to direct the visual and special effects for both opening and closing ceremonies. However, the work was aired as a video rather than live due to the conditions of smog in Beijing. So they basically had to do it on tape because they weren't sure that people would be able to see the live version because it's just so smoggy. So when you put something on tape, you can get the best vantage point. You can put the camera at a place where they're definitely going to get it. Kai believed the video was necessary and considered it a second work of art. So that video, even though people saw it on video, that can also be considered art. Some people disagreed, and again, this is where we get into our debate, what is art and what's not. Certain people were of the mindset that that's not fair. That wasn't art because we didn't get to experience that ephemeral moment. Well, you're right, you weren't there. So that's just my personal opinion. That's sarcasm. All right, world as we perceive it. Objection to Kai's footprints of history mainly centered around the violation of trust regarding the digital film being broadcast instead of the real thing. Many of us assume that we can trust our eyes to give us accurate information and understanding of the world. Is that true? Can we trust our eyes? No, because our eyes just take in the light that's bouncing off whatever object is in front of us. So if that object, if someone is purposely trying to create an illusion, it might look like something that it's not. So for example, one of these zoos, I can't remember, somewhere in Asia, was trying to convince people that they had a lion. So they had a large dog that they put a mane on. People looked and said, "Hey, I saw a lion." No, you didn't. And it was exposed pretty quickly because other people had experience with real lions. They knew what lions looked like. But if you had never seen a lion, people only told you what a lion was, described it, and you went to the zoo, you would pull out your cell phone and do a selfie with a fake lion. That's why you want to see as much as you can for yourself in person, or meet as many people as you can that have seen it in person. Visual processing can be divided into reception, extraction, and inference. The human retina edits information perceived from external sources. Seeing is inherently creative as you decide what details are important. So what they're basically saying is, when you look at something in reality, your brain puts together what it is. It uses its tools and concepts and experience to figure out what it is. So depending on what your experience is, we could both be looking at the same thing and I have a different experience. We'll see something totally different. When I see a male in a hoodie, I'm like, yeah, that could be me. I'm not intimidated. I'm not threatened. Some other people might see somebody in a hoodie and be very nervous. We're looking at the same thing. We're perceiving two different things. The inference is different. All right? The human retina, seeing is inherently creative. So again, you're creating your reality in your head. It might not have to do with what's in reality. It might be more about you. And that's also what art's about. You being okay, basically questioning yourself, who you are. And a lot of people don't know how to do that. When they are uncomfortable, they lash out, they get emotional and defensive. As opposed to just using your analytical skills and saying, okay, how much of this is me? And how much of it is in my power to fix? Right? We can live in a life of excuses. We can do that. But I think there's more analytical, critical thinking if we also say, what part do we play in the process or the bigger picture? Trompel-l'oel is a technique literally meaning trick the eye. Richard Haas is a painter. So that's our second vocabulary word. Third? Oh, wow. We're moving faster than I thought. Okay. So, Trompel-l'oel. I'm sorry, yeah, you're right. It's the third. Which one is it? Yes. And let's take a look at what that looks like. Yeah. Trompel-l'oel. Richard is a painter known for such architectural murals, such as the one on the west facade of Oregon Historical Society. Stored visual information can also trick a viewer, even for images seen on a regular basis, such as the American flag. So again, I gave you an example of someone tried to trick us by putting a mane on a, I forgot what kind of dog that was, but they're large and they resemble, larger animals. So there's an example. This is a little small, but basically this is a brick stone mason building, and this painter has drawn on it to make you think that it is some type of ornament of brick and concrete and masonry. But that's he just painted on the building. The building's really not impressive. But he's put angles on there to make you think it's three-dimensional, that somebody has actually put on some type of sculpture, some type of carving. I know it's a little small on this screen, but do you guys know what do you guys recognize what I'm trying to describe? In fact, when I was in Canada, I took a picture of somebody else and their Trompel-l'oel. Let me see if I can find it real quick. All right, it's kind of hard to see, but this is another building that's brick, but they drew it as somebody had ripped the paint off and exposed the real building. And they they painted around the windows. Can you guys see that? Actually, let me zoom back in so we can get a little more detail. Can I pan? But you can see that they have drawn, even drew screws, right? Those aren't physical screws. They're just painting representation, symbols of what your brain thinks a screw is. So you see a screw. That's not there. That's just paint. So I asked you, what's that on the board? You guys said a cat. I said ink. So it looks like there's masonry, and this is a beautiful building. It's an illusion. Trompel-l'oel. Trompel-l'oel. Got it? And that's what this building's doing. Jasper John's flag takes a familiar image and examines it more closely. It was painted during the Cold War era, a time when America obsessed with patriotism through McCarthyism and the space race. So he's giving you cultural context of what was happening at the time. We used to, a few of you guys might be a little young, but we went through this era in America of tribalism where we were competing against Russia. And they were perceived as the enemy. And we had to beat them at everything at all cost. So we wanted to be the first to go to space. They were the first to go to space. We wanted to be the first to get to the moon. We won that one. We won that one. It was very competitive, and we wanted to have the most bombs and make more than they were making. They were trying to make more than us. And we had spies, and they had spies, and everyone was paranoid, and everyone had this irrational fear and hate of each other. If you're not like me, then you're the enemy. You're Russian, you commie. We associated it with the negative connotation of communism being bad, evil, anti-American, anti-capitalism. So Jasper John's flag addresses this. We had a senator named McCarthy who would use those emotions to bully people, take advantage of people. So he had this briefcase, and he said he had a list of all these names of communists on it. And you might be on that list. And if you're on that list, you're in trouble. America's going to put you in jail. And he used that briefcase and that piece of paper to basically destroy people's lives. Anything he didn't like about them, he would say, that's communism. Bad. Go to jail. You're on the list. Did that for years. McCarthyism. Scary. Scary place. We might be heading back to that place. Hopefully more people have worldviews and remember that time and information so we don't repeat that. We can scare people with fear, right? And bias and prejudice. Tell people they're evil, right? Without any proof. Just because I say so. All right, audiences were disturbed by the newspaper scraps visible beneath the surface. So when he made his flag, America has always been born in a lot of pride. Basically, we are very nationalistic, where we felt that America's number one. And so a lot of people have had double consciousness. African Americans have lived in America since 1619, right? Right? This year is our, 400th anniversary? Right? That flag has been flying over slaves, Native Americans. So they've had a different experience of that symbol that they've seen, what it represents. Russia looks at an American flag and they have a different emotional response to what that means, the concept in their head. Right? So he drew the flag a little different. Most people will always have this respect and pride of America, what it stands for. Elitism, we're the best. We're number one. Right? So our flag should be respected and always only displayed in some type of pristine fashion. Clean. Never let it touch the ground. Don't kneel while it's up. But other people have had an experience where the flag has meant something a little different. They had concentration camps for internment camps for the Japanese during World War II. American citizens every morning had to say a Pledge of Allegiance behind a fence in a cage to a flag. What do you think that flag represents to them? Every morning someone took your house, put you in a cage area, and you have to say Pledge of Allegiance to a flag every morning? What does that flag mean to you? I hear they have new internment camps at the border. I wonder if they're making those people say the Pledge of Allegiance every morning. So people were disturbed because everyone has different life experience. Some people have only had positive experiences with America. And that's not a value statement or judgment. That's just their experience, limited or not. Same with police officers, right? Some people have had great experiences with police officers. So when they see a police officer, that's a hero, that's a respectable person, that's a person with values. Other people have not had that experience. We're looking at the same thing, but we're seeing two different things, right? Does everyone understand perception? So this is how he made the flag. It's a little dirty. It wasn't even. It had texture to it. It looks like old newspaper, and people were offended. It looks tattered. That's not how you're supposed to represent the American flag. What are you saying? You're saying America's not perfect? Is that what you're trying to tell me? Is that your message? Art is expression. It always has a meaning and a message. And people pick it up and they interpret that concept, that symbol, based on their experience. So some people would be offended by that. Some people would interpret it as, okay, I know what you're saying. Some people's like, I don't know what you're talking about. America's been nothing but great for me. It's just different life experience. Faith Ringgold's God Bless America was created during the Civil Rights Movement. Again, double consciousness. America, because we live in different realities in America. People have different experiences in America. During the Civil Rights Movement, African Americans were not given full citizenship or their rights. Had to sit in the back of the bus. Couldn't live in certain communities. But we better say the Pledge of Allegiance when we see the flag, right? We better say that America's the greatest place on earth. Heck, the Tuskegee Airmen flew during World War II, fought and freed for democracy so that people can have their rights, so that Jewish citizens could be free from discrimination. Those airmen flew back here and had to go to a separate drinking fountain. Is there any hypocrisy there? I ask. That experience for African American soldiers might have been a little different for other soldiers. Could be. America might not be perfect. That's a possibility, is it not? Use your critical thinking skills. Or is America always right? The best. All right, so have we gotten to question 1 yet? All right, so we'll keep going. Let's get through this slide. Here, the stripes have been turned into prison bars, and the stars become a sheriff's badge. The white woman is portrayed as both patriotic and racist, a prisoner of bigotry. Again, two different experiences. White women have also been victims of oppression, but they have also exercised oppression. So maybe you can have two experiences at once. Maybe two things can be true at the same time. So there's a lot of messaging, a lot of symbolism in that. And a lot of people would be offended. if you don't believe America's perfect, if you don't believe that there's no better place in the world, and there's room for debate. America's great. Can it be better? Can it? The world as an artist sees it. Kai did not choose to go to Dunhuang simply to extend the end of the Great Wall of China. The area was the place where East and West first intersected. He chose that place specifically. There was a message. There's a reason he chose that place. That's where Western culture met Eastern culture. It was a market. Terracotta figure of the Tang Dynasty shows a Bactrian camel that would have transported goods. So a lot of trading was done there. The region also has the greatest collection of early Chinese art. So there's a lot of symbolism in the location he chose. There is a sculpture of market men of the time from that era. So the world as the artist sees it. Legend has it that the cave temple was dug by a Buddhist monk named Lasun, over the years becoming more decorated until it was recognized in the 14th century as the Mago Caves. 492 of these caves are decorated with murals together about 40 times longer than the walls in Sistine Chapel. So this is a place where basically, you'll see in the book, but there's a lot of art history at this location, kind of this monastery where monks were. So again, those caves are very, very symbolic, the area he chose, kind of where he kind of probably might identify as probably the earliest art, some of the first art. So why not acknowledge it or pay some type of homage, right? So there it is. Those are the caves that people made. It was a stop, layover that eventually grew and has a lot of decoration, artwork, paint, and these are monuments that he kind of just was acknowledging. There is a Buddha inside, very large. Again, by making something large, that artist that made that sculpture is basically saying how large, you can interpret that as that figure and that lifestyle is magnificent in size and beauty. All right? If you read the book, they have basically explained that. Artists engage in critical thinking. They respond to the unexpected chance occurrences and are open to new ways of thinking. The artist manages the process from seeing to imagining to making, becoming self-critical and exploring the possibilities of their work. So we talked about that. Artists make themselves vulnerable, challenge themselves. They might look at themselves and say, I might not be perfect. Maybe I have flaws. Let me at least acknowledge them. I don't know if I'll promote them or try to fix them, but let me just do the first step and acknowledge I'm not perfect or there's problems. An artist isn't afraid to do that. Self-reflection, self-evaluation. Can we all do that in life? Artist manages the process from seeing, imagining, to making, becoming self-critical, and exploring the possibilities of their work. Artists are very self-critical. Aesthetics refer to our sense of what is beautiful and vary across cultures over time. We've talked about that, right? Do we understand that? What if I told you that you had to have straight hair to be beautiful? Small lips to be conventionally beautiful? What if I told you that? For years. Showed you that for years. A lot of opinion would be formed, right? On what is beauty. Light skin, dark skin. Western culture values order, regularity, proportion, and design, which are hallmarks seen through classical art and architecture. So basically, we went through a time and period in art where everything had to be symmetrical, and the extreme of perfection. You know, when they drew certain people, their skin was flawless. There was the right proportions. Everything had symmetry, you know. And a lot of people don't look like that. But that's what was popular in art. So mountain ranges were dismissed until the 19th century in the U.S. because they didn't feel that nature, landscape, was beautiful because it wasn't balanced and even and thought out and purposed. What? What are you talking about? You been to the ocean? You been to the Grand Canyon? Yeah, it's not symmetrical, but who cares? The human body is also a widely contested source of beauty. Imagine tall, slender fashion models compared to Peter Paul Rubens' fleshy nudes. Pablo Picasso's representation of women are almost demonic, segmented, and abstracted in a battle between attraction and repulsion. So, backstory on this. This artist was going through a tumultuous time with his marriage, and a lot of people suspect that this is a drawing of his wife, who was a beautiful model. But at the time, his brain, the concept in his mind of what he saw was a little different from somebody else's reality of how beautiful his wife was. You see what I'm talking about, what the artist's intent is, their perception, what they want you to see, what they think they see in their head. Artists make a visual record of people, places, and events of their time and place. The art of portraiture reflects a desire to record what the artist sees visually. And remember, before cell phones, before cameras, artists were the ones to document what things look like. That was kind of their job. They were documentarians. But times change, right? The artist reflects a desire to record what the artist sees visually. McLean Thomas paints portraits of contemporary African American women and poses evoking odalisques similar to Manet's Olympia. Odalisques, that's one of our words. Does anyone know what an odalisque is? Let's go to our test. Odalisque. Lasting for a short time, 3-panel, Turkish word for harem slave girl or concubine. It's that. It's a concubine, slave girl. Got it? So the reason they referenced Manet's Olympia with McLean Thomas's portrait is because Manet's Olympia was one of the first pieces of art that broke tradition with who women are and how they're perceived and how they are to be portrayed. Usually with nudes, there was some shame to that, little modesty. Women were supposed to be a little bit subordinate. And so, usually to make everyone feel comfortable, the way nudes were done was a very clean and clinical portraits, so people can make the academic argument that, oh, this is just art. We don't sexualize it. So he was the first person to kind of change that. And then McLean kind of did a version of her own. She's African American. If you guys look at your optional supplemental material, I put a video of that artist explaining her artwork. So she did her version of it, and it's an African American woman who is confident, assured, authoritative, empowered. All right? Images that might not have been promoted as much before this painting, right? of assertive, strong women, especially African American women, right? So there is Manet's version, Olympia. His actually had the subject with an expression looking at the painter directly, eye contact, with confidence, the little bit of authority, assured. And it makes people feel uncomfortable that the subject is actually looking at us, making us self-aware that we're looking at them. A lot of backstory. If you read your readings, then you'll see that it's suspected that this was a prostitute, and he's empowering this woman in all her confidence. And flowers being brought to her can be interpreted by the suitor person from our perspective who's looking at her, and the cat doesn't like that person and is hissing. You can see the cat at the edge of the bed.
You can also see that McLean has a cat
At the foot. But she reversed the colors. Instead of a black cat, white cat that kind of blends in. Compare and contrast. Can you see the homage? A lot of artists are inspired by other artists. Roles of the artist. Artists make a visual record of people, places, and events in their time and place. Portrait of Menonja was sold to the Akron Art Museum and featured hundreds of rhinestones. Anamorphic cat directly references the black cat opposite Olympia's feet in Manet's work. Artists make a visual record of people, places, and events, their time and place. Olympia was also reflective of time through Manet's audience, though Manet's audience did not wish to acknowledge it as anything but appalling. So during that time, when the Olympia painting came out, people were like, oh my God, that's vulgar. That's not art. People have come to have different opinions, views, perspectives. But at the time, that was groundbreaking and it was revolutionary. From sketch to final vision, Pablo Picasso's Demoiselles, d'Avignon, an early sketch conceived 5 prostitutes and 2 men in the work. So the first version that he had drawn, and we know this now because they've taken x-rays, there were 2 men in the painting. And the intent was, one was a doctor and one was possibly a man courting prostitutes. And he was just trying to show the dichotomy of 2 experiences. Medical man looking at a naked body completely objectively as far as in a very academic way, and another man looking at a woman sexually. Looking at the same thing, seeing 2 different things. See a theme here? So that was the original sketch that you can see from the x-ray. There's a man right there, a man right there. The women look like women for the most part. You can see the idea, the concept of a woman. And that's the cool thing about symbols. If you just have enough recognizable features, the concept will tell you what you think it is. Women have breasts, right? Women have a different figure and shape, right? Even if I didn't show you the face, there's a lot of identifiable characteristics that we identify with women, right? A lot of that's just physiological. The hormones that are produced produce different body types. So artists can manipulate that fact that they know that there are visual triggers that make us think that this is something or this is not something. Same with the Trompel-l'oel. They know that shading and certain angles will make people think that it's real or 3D. From the sketch Final Vision, Pablo Picasso's Les Demoiselles, De Avignon, originally all figures looked like the middle two. And then he put African, rumor has it he was traveling and he saw an exhibition with African masks, and he put African masks on the women. And now that just changes the vibe, because an African mask in a certain context doesn't mean anything. It's immaterial. But you put something to make somebody have to think that this isn't what I'm used to, and have to use their critical skills of what is it, and it becomes art. Because now we have to kind of, instead of assuming that we know what it is, we have to kind of figure out what the heck is going on. This African mask, why is it on these European women? I don't understand. What is he trying to say? Now I got you. You want to know what I'm trying to say. You're listening. I got you. Provocative, right? The impossible multiple points of view present the painting as an ambiguity of experience. So the way he drew the women with this crazy positioning where you can't tell if it's the front of the woman or the back of the woman, again, makes your brain go, it's an optical illusion where you're like, what's going on? What is that? So we'll look at that. So this woman right here, you can't tell if that's her back or her front. And the way he has the head, the perspective of the head, you can't tell if the head's facing us or away. It's an optical illusion, again, to make you think, what the heck is going on? And if art can do that, then that's pretty powerful. All right, so that's what the head looks like of the squatting woman. If you read in the book, you can also see what it was originally, what it really actually is, and how he deformed it to be something else. Remember, there were originally two men in that. Artists help us see the world in a new and innovative way. Kwei's work was designed to transform viewers' experience of the world. Prior to his work, Gonzales Day researched the history of lynching in California, finding Native Americans, Chinese immigrants, and Latinos were lynched more than other groups. Does everyone know that people were lynched in America? You guys aware that citizens of this country were allowed to be publicly executed for no other reason than emotion? Raise your hand if you're not aware that that happened in history. Do you feel that that is promoted in history books? Did you guys read that in your history books? And if you didn't, you have to question, okay, then how do you know it happened? Again, if people aren't comfortable with their past and imperfections, then we can't get to the reality of what this is, the truth of what this is. Is it a cat, a dog, or a lion? What is America? Sometimes artists ask those questions and they make you ask that question. There's the tree he took a picture of. And a lot of people were disturbed by it. They found it very unattractive. That was his point. It's the ugly side of history. Artists help us see the world in a new or innovative ways. The photograph at daylight transforms our view of the oak tree that is once mossy, tangled, and majestic at the sight of violent deaths. So I was just listening to this one interview about a new book that just came out, and perspective is very interesting. A lot of people, again, have only had great experiences with America. So some of the early books that were written about slavery used to judge slaves for being so narrow-minded that they couldn't see how beautiful the banks of rivers were when they were on the boats from the slave holes. They couldn't see that beauty. Two different vantage points, perspectives. If I'm in the bottom of a slave ship, I don't think the destination that I've arrived at is beautiful. Yes, you have a beautiful plantation with lots of money and servants. So for you, your property, that location is the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. The sunsets are glorious. Not so much for African Americans. Artists make functional objects and structures more pleasurable and elevate them or imbue them. That's another one of our words. Imbue them with meaning. The sculpture of a film projector by Kwei and his workshop functions as a coffin. In Ghana, coffins celebrate a successful life with ritual significance. This artist turns coffins into functional symbols and objects that represent maybe what the person or the deceased was passionate about or what they felt represented them. So someone was into film, so he made a coffin that looks like a movie projector. That's pretty powerful, right? Coffins, for us, the symbol of a coffin, what pops into your head when you think about a coffin? Death. You're not thinking about good things, but sometimes maybe we should be thinking about life. So if I turn the coffin into a projector, I'm thinking about that person's life. What movies did they make? What movies did they love? What movies did we see together? It's a different emotion from some pine box with rusty nails. Roles of the artist. Artists make functional objects and structures, buildings more pleasurable and elevate them to imbue them with meaning, public spaces and features. So let's go back to the vocab real quick. Imbue. What does that mean? Inspire or permeate with feeling or quality. He gave you the feeling of this person's life meant something. It was beautiful. All right. Triptych, that is a 3-paneled piece of art. And subterfuge. Deceit used in order to achieve one's goal. And immaterial is spiritual rather than physical. So a lot of people felt that with the subterfuge word, that basically came up with Chang's recorded explosion. People felt like they were being deceived. That wasn't the real thing. Of course it wasn't the real thing. We didn't mean to trick you. We weren't trying to trick you. Well, maybe they were. I don't know that. That's an assumption I just made. Maybe they were trying to trick them. Roles of the artist. Artists make functional objects, public space features, standards of aesthetic beauty, self-sufficiency, sustainable building material, and suitability to climate and culture, exemplify green architecture. Artists make functional objects. Yeah. So this is just architecture that lends itself to the messaging of green world. It's kind of made to look like bamboo, and you guys can read about it in your book. Artists give form to the immaterial, hidden or universal truths, spiritual forces, and personal feelings. Western approach to works from African, Oceanic, Asian, and Native American cultures often relegates everyday objects to works of art. These objects may serve a utilitarian or sacred function, a context far removed from Western lens. So a lot of our views basically are different. And Chang gave us a chance to see his culture in the beautiful aspect of how he sees it. All right, artists give form to the immaterial hidden universe in Congo. All right. Just going to go through these. This painting at one point was banned and got value later on, but basically it was 3 different paintings. And basically it's a painting of the same subject but from different vantages. And then later, after they were rediscovered and put together, the value went insane. So valuation of art, again, is all about perception, also what society deems as art. Definitely the monetary value is established by auctions and auctioneers, but the intrinsic value might come from cultural context. Robert Mapplethorpe. All right. This is an artist who had a lot of homoerotic, sadomasochistic work, and of course the public was not comfortable. He took a picture of a young girl's genitals, and it was deemed as pornographic, and then later, when a jury reviewed it, you guys can read in your book, but basically they found the body of his work and how he took the picture and the symmetry that was involved and the aesthetic principles that he used, that it was art. The photos were seized. Is that art? Symmetry would tell you that yes, it is. The way the photo looks, the way the human body, the form is expressed, the lighting, the shading, the time that it took to actually give you that lighting. Impressive. Again, Holy Virgin Mary, we'll do one more. Basically, an artist did his rendition of Holy Virgin Mary. He used manure to make it. That's sacrilegious to certain groups, right? Virgin Mary is something, again, a symbol that is to be held in the highest esteem. So people were offended and said that that wasn't art. You can read that in your book.